Jazz. The day my husband walked away, he smiled. Not a nervous smile. Not the kind someone gives when they don't know what to say. It was the smile of a man who believed he had already won. Jazz. I stood in the doorway of the house we had shared for 11 years, watching him carry the last of his bags to his car. The afternoon sun reflected off the windows, Jazz, making everything look brighter than it felt. Birds were singing somewhere nearby. A neighbor waved as she watered her flowers. To everyone else, it looked like an ordinary day. To me, Jazz, it felt like my entire world had quietly fallen apart. He didn't look back because he didn't think he needed to. Before opening the driver's door, he turned toward me one last time. Jazz. I hope you learn to move on, he said with a calm voice. Then he smiled again. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't loud. That was what made it hurt even more. Jazz. It was the smile of someone completely sure that I would spend the rest of my life regretting losing him. He believed I would cry. He believed I would beg. Jazz. He believed I would always wonder what I could have done differently. He was wrong, but I didn't know that yet, because at that moment, Jazz, I was still trying to understand how the man I loved had become someone I barely recognized. For years I had told myself that every marriage had difficult seasons. Every couple argued. Jazz. Every relationship changed. I believed love meant staying through the hard days. I believed patience could fix almost anything. Looking back now, I realized something painful. Jazz. Sometimes patience only gives a liar more time to hide the truth. The silence after his car disappeared was louder than any argument we had ever had. I stood there for what felt like forever. Jazz. My phone remained silent. No messages, no calls, no apology, nothing. Inside the house, every room reminded me of a memory. The kitchen where we laughed while trying new recipes. Jazz. The living room where we spent holidays together. The hallway where we painted the walls because he said we were building our forever home. Every corner carried a promise. Every promise now felt empty. Jazz. I slowly closed the front door. The sound echoed through the house. For the first time in years, I was completely alone. That evening, I walked through every room without turning on the lights. Jazz. Some people think heartbreak arrives all at once. It doesn't. It comes in small moments. Seeing his favorite coffee mug, finding one of his jackets in the closet, looking at the empty side of the bed. Jazz. Each little reminder quietly whispers, "It's over." I sat on the couch holding a picture from our 10th anniversary. We looked happy. Maybe we really were. Jazz. Or maybe one of us had already started pretending. I couldn't tell anymore. Questions filled my mind. When did he stop loving me? Had he ever truly loved me? Was everything we built together real? Jazz. Or had I simply believed the story he wanted me to believe? That night, sleep never came. Around 2 in the morning, I heard rain tapping against the windows. Jazz. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the dining table. The house felt unfamiliar, not because anything had changed, but because the person who made it feel like home had chosen to leave. Jazz. I kept replaying our final conversation. He had spoken with complete confidence, almost as if he already knew exactly how my future would look. Lonely, broken, forgotten. It wasn't just that he left. Jazz. It was the certainty in his eyes. He truly believed there was nothing I could ever do to surprise him. He thought he knew every chapter of my story. He had no idea one chapter had never been opened. Jazz. As the rain grew heavier, I noticed something strange. Near the bookshelf was an old wooden box covered in dust. I hadn't seen it in years. It belonged to my late grandmother. She always told me, "Jazz, some answers don't arrive until you're ready to hear them." Back then, I thought she was simply speaking in riddles. Now, those words returned to me for a reason I couldn't explain. Jazz. I carried the box to the table. The lock was old but already broken. Inside were faded photographs. old birthday cards, a small silver key, and an envelope. It was sealed. Across the front, Gaz, written in careful handwriting, were only 7 words. Open only when everything else falls apart. My hands froze. I stared at those words for what felt like an hour. Who had written it? Gaz. Why had no one ever mentioned it? And why did it feel as though someone had known this day would come? Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Inside, my heart beat faster than it had in years. Gaz. Part of me wanted to put the envelope back, to pretend I had never found it, because sometimes the unknown feels safer than the truth. Gaz. But something inside me whispered that my life had already changed the moment my husband smiled and walked away. Maybe losing him wasn't the end. Gaz. Maybe it was the beginning of something I had never imagined. I slowly reached for the envelope. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. Gaz. I had no idea that the letter inside would uncover a secret hidden for decades. A secret powerful enough to change everything I believed about my marriage, my family, and even who I really was. Gaz. The man who walked away smiling believed he had closed the final chapter of my life. He couldn't have been more wrong, because the story was only just beginning. The next morning, Gaz. The letter still lay unopened on the dining table. I had broken the seal, but I couldn't bring myself to read the words inside. Gaz. Some part of me already knew that whatever was written there would change my life forever. And after everything that had happened the day before, I wasn't sure I was ready for one more surprise. Gaz. So instead of opening the letter, I made coffee. I stood by the kitchen window, watching the neighborhood slowly wake up. Children waited for school buses. Neighbors greeted each other with warm smiles. Gaz. Cars came and went like any ordinary weekday. The world hadn't changed, only mine had. As I looked around the house, memories came rushing back. Gaz. There was a time when everyone said we had the perfect marriage. People admired us. Friends asked us for relationship advice. Gaz. Family members often joked that we would grow old together and never stop smiling. If someone had told me back then that my husband would one day walk away without a single tear, I would have laughed. Gaz. Because our story didn't begin with heartbreak, it began with hope. I met Ethan when I was 26. It wasn't some dramatic movie moment. No music, no fireworks. 2 strangers reaching for the same book in a small bookstore downtown. He smiled first. "You can have it," he said. I smiled back. "Only if you promise to tell me why you wanted it." He laughed. Gaz. That simple conversation lasted almost an hour. We talked about books, dreams, travel, childhood memories, and every random subject that came to mind. When I finally walked out of the store, Gaz, I realized I had forgotten why I came there in the first place. All I could think about was him. 3 days later, he called. 1 week later, we had our first dinner together. 6 months later, Gaz. I knew I loved him. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't the loudest person in the room. He made me feel safe. He listened when I spoke. He remembered small details about my life. Gaz. He noticed when I was tired before I even admitted it. For the first time, I felt completely understood. At least, that's what I believed. Our wedding wasn't expensive. Gaz. We couldn't afford a luxury venue. Instead, we rented a beautiful little garden surrounded by old oak trees. It rained that morning. Everyone worried the ceremony would be ruined. Gaz. But just minutes before I walked down the aisle, the clouds disappeared. Sunlight poured through the trees. My grandmother squeezed my hand. She whispered something I'll never forget. Gaz. Real love isn't measured by perfect days. It's measured by the days when everything goes wrong. At the time, I thought she was simply giving marriage advice. Years later, Gaz, I would realize she was warning me. Life wasn't always easy. We struggled financially during our first years together. There were months when we counted every dollar before grocery shopping. Jazz. We postponed vacations. We delayed buying furniture. Sometimes we laughed because our dining table was just an old folding table, covered with a nice cloth. But somehow, Jazz. Those years became my favorite memories. We dreamed together. Every small success felt like a shared victory. When Ethan got promoted, we celebrated with cheap pizza, because that was all we could afford. Jazz. When I finally received a raise at work, he surprised me with flowers from the local market. They're not expensive, he said, but they're yours, Jazz. Little moments like that made me believe I had chosen the right person. 5 years into our marriage, we bought our first house. It wasn't large. The roof leaked during heavy rain. Jazz. The backyard looked more like a field than a garden. The kitchen cabinets needed replacing. Most people would have seen problems. We saw possibilities. Every weekend became another project. Jazz. Painting walls, planting flowers, fixing broken shelves, building something that truly belonged to us. Whenever visitors came over, they complimented our home. You two make such a great team, Jazz. You always look so happy. I hope my marriage is like yours. I smiled every time. So did Ethan. Neither of us corrected them because from the outside, it really did look perfect, Jazz. Then came social media. Friends loved our photos, weekend trips, holiday dinners, birthday celebrations, anniversary vacations. People left comments like relationship goals, Jazz. The happiest couple I know. This gives me hope that true love still exists. Sometimes I'd read those comments and feel grateful. Other times, Jazz, I wondered why I felt strangely empty after posting another smiling picture. Looking back now, I understand why. A photograph only captures a second. It never tells the whole story, Jazz. Around our 8th anniversary, small things began to change. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, just little moments. Ethan started working later. Business dinners became more frequent, Jazz. Weekend meetings suddenly appeared on his calendar. He spent more time looking at his phone. Sometimes he smiled while reading messages. When I asked who he was talking to, Jazz, he'd answer without looking up. Just work. And because I trusted him, that answer was enough. I never checked his phone. I never questioned his schedule, Jazz. I never imagined the man I loved could be hiding anything from me. Trust can be beautiful, but blind trust can become dangerous. One evening, we were invited to a dinner party with close friends, Jazz. The room was full of laughter, stories, music, people raising glasses. At one point, someone asked the question every married couple eventually hears. So, what's your secret? Everyone looked at us, Jazz. Ethan wrapped his arm around my shoulder. He smiled confidently. We never keep secrets. The table erupted with admiration. People applauded. Someone even joked that we should write a relationship book, Jazz. I laughed along with everyone else. But something about the way Ethan answered made me pause. Not because he sounded dishonest, because he answered too quickly, almost as though he'd practiced it, Jazz. That tiny moment stayed with me long after the party ended. At the time, I ignored it. Now I wish I hadn't. As the years passed, I noticed another change. He stopped asking about my day, Jazz. Our conversations became shorter. Dinner turned into quiet meals in front of the television. If I shared good news, he smiled politely but seemed distracted. If I talked about my worries, he'd say, Jazz, everything will be fine. Then he'd return to his phone. It wasn't cruel. It was worse. It felt absent, like he was physically beside me but emotionally somewhere else. I told myself it was stress, Jazz. Work pressure. Life after all. Every marriage changes over time. Right? That's what everyone says. And when everyone repeats the same idea, it's easy to believe your own loneliness is normal, Jazz. One rainy afternoon, I found an old photo album while cleaning the attic. Inside were pictures from our honeymoon, camping trips, Christmas mornings, Lazy Sundays spent cooking breakfast together. Jazz. I smiled through tears. The man in those pictures looked at me with genuine warmth, or at least I thought he did. I sat there for nearly an hour, turning page after page. Jazz. Then something caught my attention. Tucked inside the back cover was a receipt from a small cafe. On the back, Ethan had written a note years ago. "No matter what happens, I'll always choose you, Jazz." I traced the words with my finger. How could someone write that? Then one day walk away smiling. What changes a heart so completely? Was it one mistake? One decision? Jazz. Or had the change happened so slowly that neither of us noticed until it was too late? That question haunted me as I walked downstairs. The unopened letter was still waiting on the dining table. Jazz. The room suddenly felt quieter than before. The sunlight had shifted. Dust floated gently through the air. Everything seemed to be holding its breath. I picked up the envelope again. This time, Jazz. I wasn't thinking about Ethan. I wasn't thinking about our marriage. I was thinking about the words my grandmother had written on the front. Open only when everything else falls apart. For years, Jazz. I believed the greatest secret in my life was why my husband stopped loving me. I was wrong. The real secret had been waiting in this house long before I ever met him. And in just a few moments, Jazz, I would finally begin to understand why the day he walked away smiling wasn't the worst day of my life. It was the day the truth finally found me. I stared at the envelope for what felt like forever. Jazz. My fingers rested on the folded paper inside, but I still couldn't bring myself to pull it out. There was something strange about that letter. It didn't feel like an old family memory. It felt personal, almost as if it had been waiting for this exact moment. The house was silent. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving tiny drops of water on the windows. Jazz. Everything seemed unusually calm, the kind of calm that comes just before life changes forever. I finally unfolded the letter. The paper had turned slightly yellow with age. Jazz. But the handwriting was neat and easy to read. At the top were just 3 words. My dearest Lily. No one had called me Lily in years. To everyone else, I was Lily Carter. To my grandmother, Jazz, I was simply my little sunshine. Seeing those words made my eyes fill with tears. I kept reading. If you are reading this, then life has not been kind to you, Jazz. I prayed you would never need this letter. I hoped you would live a peaceful life and never ask the questions that haunted our family for decades, Jazz. But if the day ever came when everything you trusted fell apart, then you deserve the truth. I stopped. My heart began beating faster. What truth? What questions? Jazz. What had my grandmother been hiding all these years? I turned the page. There is something you were never told about your parents. My hands started trembling. Jazz. My parents had died in a car accident when I was only 9 years old. At least, that's what I had believed my entire life. My grandmother raised me after that. She never spoke much about the past, Jazz. Whenever I asked questions, she'd smile sadly and say, "Some stories hurt more each time they're told." I had respected her silence. Now I wondered if that silence had protected something much bigger. Jazz. I continued reading. The accident was real, but the story you were told was incomplete. I felt my stomach tighten. Your father left something behind, not money, not property. He left proof. Proof? Proof of what? I searched the page, desperate for answers. Then I found another sentence. The silver key inside the box opens a safe deposit box at Ashton National Bank. Jazz. I looked toward the little silver key lying on the table. It suddenly seemed far more important than an old family keepsake. The letter continued. Jazz. Inside that box are documents your father wanted you to receive, only when you were old enough to understand them. I promised him I would wait. Please forgive me for keeping this from you, Jazz. I wanted you to have a normal childhood. I wanted you to grow up without fear. Most importantly, I wanted you to choose your own life before learning where you truly came from. Jazz. Where I truly came from. The words echoed in my mind. Nothing made sense anymore. I turned to the final page. Trust very carefully. Not everyone who smiles at you wishes you well. Jazz. Sometimes the greatest danger doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people who already know your secrets. My breathing became shallow. The last line was underlined. Jazz. The truth will explain why certain people entered your life. I read it again and again. Certain people entered my life for the first time since Ethan left. Jazz. My thoughts shifted away from our marriage. Could he somehow be connected to this? No, that sounded impossible, didn't it? I folded the letter carefully. Jazz. My grandmother had passed away 6 years earlier. There was no one left to ask, no one who could explain any of this. Only the key, only the safe deposit box, only more questions. I glanced at the clock. Jazz. Ashton National Bank would still be open for another 2 hours. A part of me wanted to wait, to think, to breathe. But another part, the stronger part, knew I had already waited long enough. Jazz. I grabbed my coat, slipped the key into my pocket, and left the house. The drive to the bank felt strangely familiar. I had passed the building hundreds of times over the years. Jazz. Never once had I imagined something belonging to my family was waiting inside. Traffic was light. My mind wasn't. Every possibility rushed through my thoughts. Maybe the box contained old family photos. Jazz. Maybe legal papers, maybe letters, or maybe nothing important at all. Perhaps my grandmother had simply been sentimental. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. The bank lobby was quiet. Jazz. An older woman behind the front desk smiled politely. How may I help you today? I placed the key on the counter. I believe my family has a safe deposit box here. Jazz. She examined the key before typing something into her computer. A few seconds passed, then her expression changed. May I see your identification, please? After checking my ID, she nodded slowly. Yes, Jazz. The box has been inactive for many years. It was registered under your father's name. Hearing those words made my chest tighten. Jazz. She disappeared into another room before returning with a small metal box. We have a private room where you may examine the contents. She placed the box in front of me. For several seconds, Jazz. I couldn't move. Everything in my life seemed divided into 2 parts. The woman I had been before opening this box, and the woman I was about to become. I unlocked it. The lid creaked softly. Jazz. Inside were several folders. A leather journal, old photographs, a sealed envelope marked, "For Lily only." My eyes immediately went to the journal. On the first page, written in familiar handwriting, Jazz, were words that made my entire body freeze. If you're reading this, someone finally broke the promise I hoped would never be broken. I swallowed hard. Then I noticed something else beneath the journal. Jazz. A newspaper clipping. Its headline read, "Local businessman resigns after financial scandal." The article was over 25 years old. A face stared back at me from the faded paper. I frowned. Jazz. There was something familiar about him. Very familiar. I leaned closer. My heart skipped a beat. I had seen that face before. Not in an old newspaper, not in a photograph. In my own home. Jazz. On my wedding day, in family pictures, because the man in that article looked almost exactly like Ethan's father. I stared at the photograph in disbelief. "No," I whispered. "Jazz, that can't be possible." But deep inside, for the first time, I began to wonder if meeting Ethan all those years ago had really been an accident. Jazz. Or if someone had quietly been moving the pieces, long before either of us ever fell in love. Jazz. My hands shook as I compared the newspaper photo with the family pictures I had seen so many times at Ethan's parents' house. The resemblance was undeniable. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Gaz. I quickly opened my father's journal. Page after page revealed a story I had never imagined. Years ago, my father had worked with Ethan's father in a successful company, Gaz. They were close friends, until someone secretly changed financial records and blamed everything on my father. He refused to lie to protect the real people responsible. Instead of defending him, Gaz. Everyone walked away. Before he could clear his name, the accident happened. But my father had gathered evidence, bank records, signed agreements, letters, Gaz, and a handwritten confession from the real person behind the fraud, Gaz. My grandmother had hidden everything, because she feared powerful people would destroy the evidence before I was old enough to protect it. I finally understood why she had told me to wait, Gaz. The truth wasn't about revenge, it was about timing. For days I read every document carefully, then I contacted an experienced lawyer. We verified every paper, every signature, every date, Gaz. The evidence was real. It proved my father had been innocent all along. The lawyer encouraged me to release everything through the proper legal channels. Within weeks, journalists began asking questions, Gaz. Old business partners were contacted. Former employees came forward. People who had stayed silent for years finally decided to speak. The story spread quickly, Gaz. The family that had spent decades protecting its reputation suddenly faced questions they could no longer avoid. Then my phone rang. It was Ethan. For the first time since he left, his voice sounded uncertain. Lily, can we talk? I looked at the phone for several seconds before answering. What is there to talk about? I didn't know any of this, I swear, Gaz. I only found out yesterday. I believed he was telling the truth, but believing him no longer changed anything. You still chose to leave, I replied calmly, Gaz. You still believed I was the one who would lose everything. Silence filled the call. I made a mistake. No, I answered. You made a choice. There was a difference. A week later, Gaz. Ethan came to the house. This time there was no confident smile. No expensive suit, no certainty. He looked like a man carrying years of regret. I was wrong, he admitted. I thought I knew who you were. You never even asked, I said. You believed rumors more easily than you believed your own wife. He lowered his head. I wish I could change it. I smiled gently. Gaz, so do I, but wishing doesn't rewrite the past. He left quietly. This time, he looked back. I didn't. Over the following months, my father's name was officially cleared, Gaz. The company issued a public statement acknowledging the truth. Several people apologized. Some did it sincerely. Others did it because they had no choice. Either way, it no longer mattered, Gaz. The greatest victory wasn't watching someone else's reputation fall. It was watching my father's honor finally return. I sold the old house and started over in a new city, Gaz. I opened a small publishing business dedicated to preserving forgotten family stories. Helping others tell the truth became my new purpose. One afternoon, while organizing old papers, Gaz, I found my grandmother's final note tucked inside the journal. It read, "Real strength isn't proving someone else wrong. It's refusing to become like the people who hurt you." I smiled through tears. Gaz. She had been right. The greatest secret hadn't just changed my life, it had changed my heart. Years later, people sometimes asked whether I hated Ethan. The answer always surprised them. No, Gaz. Hate would keep me connected to the past. I chose peace instead. The day he walked away smiling, he believed he had won. He thought my story ended when he closed the front door, Gaz. But life has a strange way of revealing the truth when the time is right. His smile marked the end of one chapter. The hidden letter opened another. And I learned something I will never forget, Gaz. The strongest comeback isn't built on revenge. It's built on truth, courage, and the decision to keep moving forward.